If you've followed this channel for any length of time, you'll know that I have a special place in my heart for web browser technology. Now, I'm a web developer by trade. HeavyElement.io is like one of my favorite websites I've ever made, and I love the web in general. It's a remarkable achievement when you think about how much cooperation and how many industries had to coalesce in order to achieve this singular thing that is so ubiquitous in our lives. But it's also become an absolute dumpster fire. Sure, there are intricate and beautiful works of art, expansive murals commissioned by the influential and executed by artists, but they're surrounded and even defaced by graffiti and degeneracy. Now, the degeneracy aside, browsers are a portal into the World Wide Web. And when it comes down to it, there are really only three options in this space. There's Firefox, there's Safari, and there's Chrome. Today, we're going to be talking about the latter. See, Chrome is developed by the world's foremost private sector surveillance firm, Google. Now, if you've used Google, if you've used YouTube, then you know Google has stood at the forefront of the march against privacy in the name of profit. And at every juncture, they have put greed ahead of any other consideration. I mean, civility, democracy, human rights, be damned. They will put them all on sale if they think that they can make a quick dollar. Now, as much as I love complaining about Google Chrome, I wouldn't be talking about Chrome today if they hadn't prompted yet another rhetorical screed from me against their comprehensive effort to eliminate privacy. So what is it? What have they done? Well, before we get to that, we need to have a little bit of a history lesson in order to understand what's going on. So let's go back. Just a few short years ago, Google relied on web standards to do the heavy lifting for their surveillance. They used third-party cookies to track your browsing habits between websites. See, you'd go to a website and the browser would make connections to any server that the site referenced. So if you were on HeavyElement.io, for example, and on my website I had an image linked from GardnerBryant.com, well, any session cookie that the user had for GardnerBryant.com would be sent along with the request for the image. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, per se. And this process, called third-party cookies, used to be the way the web worked. And look, there's absolutely nothing wrong with cookies in and of themselves. Cookies enable your browser to remember which sites you've been logged into, even across browser sessions, and that's usually a good and important thing, especially if you go to a website where you intend to stay logged into. Like, for example, if you go to Gmail, you probably want to stay logged in. But what if you went to another website and it had a piece of JavaScript that loads from Gmail? Well, the cookie that kept you logged into Gmail would be sent along with the request for the JavaScript, despite you primarily accessing another website. And that request would make Google's profile even more accurate about you, since they could track not only based on what browser you're using, but because you're logged in, it also is able to link it to any other device you're logged into and any browsing habits on any of those devices. And this was a prime racket to be in, as for over a decade, Google built these profiles, tracking intimate details about who you are, what you like, and crucially, which ads and services you're most likely to click on. And given the rock bottom prices that Google charged to target ads against this data, coupled with the wealth of quality information they had on a significant portion of the world's population, they were effectively able to stave off most of the competition. But social factors being what they were, many folks didn't like the idea of Google profiling them based on third-party cookies. It was too powerful. Thusly, web standards moved towards mitigating the effectiveness of Google's largest money-making apparatus, and that meant things needed to change for Google, and fast. So they tried a few different things. They proposed a new standard called FLoC. FLoC was a scheme that Google hoped other browsers would adopt, and it would effectively put the user tracking directly into the browser. But FLoC, at least in this iteration, was a flop, and so they decided to forge ahead with their own implementation. Enter the inciting incident for this video, Google's Privacy Sandbox. Now, following in the cynical tradition of the Happy Meal, Clean Coal, and, Richard Nixon, Google gave their privacy invasion tool a deceptive and friendly name. No doubt they performed market research and focus groups in order to hone in on the friendliest and most innocuously sounding title they could. But the question is, what is Privacy Sandbox? What does it do, and why do you need to drop Chrome and move over to something like Firefox as soon as possible? Well, it's pretty simple, actually. Privacy Sandbox adds new proprietary APIs, or application programming interfaces, to Chrome, and make no mistake, this Privacy Sandbox built into your browser, it's quietly collecting massive amounts of sensitive information about you and then leaking it to Google and their cronies. So, what kind of information does Google Privacy Sandbox actually collect? Well, I did some digging. Chrome will use a combination of data from your browsing history, and that includes the sites you visit and the ads you've clicked on, to certain topic cohorts that websites can assign you to as an audience member. Chrome essentially builds a profile about you and the things it thinks you're interested in. In order to get answers, we'll look at the Chrome documentation, and there are two major APIs to look at. The first is the Topics API. Quote, with the Topics API, the browser observes and records topics that appear to be of interest to the user based on their browsing activity. This information is recorded on the user's device. The Topics API can then give API callers, such as ad tech platforms, access to a user's topics of interest. And the other is the Protected Audience API. Quote, the Protected Audience API uses interest groups to enable sites to display ads that are relevant to their users. For example, when a user visits a site that wants to advertise its products, an interest group owner can ask the user's browser to add membership for the interest group. If the request is successful, the browser records 1. The name of the interest group, for example, custom bikes. 2. The owner of the interest group, for example, dsp.example. And 3. The interest group configuration information. Later, when the user visits a site with available ad space, the ad space seller can use Protected Audience to run an ad auction to select the most appropriate ads to display to the user. Now, despite what the name claims, these two technologies are not about privacy. They're about targeting you with ads. When you load up a website that's looking for ads, your browser runs an auction using the dossier that Chrome and other websites with something to sell you have built against you. It literally asks ad buyers, hey, this person is interested in cats. Who wants to buy an ad? And then the bidding commences. But it's not just Google's ad platform. Nope. Google is just the instigator, the curator, and the gatekeeper of this interest profile they have on you. Thing is, the information is no longer stored remotely on Google's servers. It's on your device, and anyone who jumps through Google's hoops can get access to this information. See, all you need to do is fill out an application with a business contact and tell Google which of these APIs you want to use. As I've alluded to, Privacy Sandbox is not just one surveillance technology, it's a collection of profiling and data collection algorithms that leak information about you to any of Google's prying partners. And since this data is locked behind only a simple enrollment process, there's so much potential here for abuse, fraud, extortion, and more, especially when it comes to the Protected Audience API. Now, I haven't seen many people report on this, but Privacy Sandbox is not just built into Chrome, it'll also be available for Android too. And while I'm not surprised, it's a pretty chilling thought, isn't it? I mean, Google's surveillance technology is going to be available against anyone using Chrome or Android, the two dominant technologies in their respective verticals. Android is the most popular operating system in the world, and Chrome is the most popular browser on the web. Thankfully, Apple and Firefox have both said that they won't support the Topics API, but this is the bigger picture problem with Chrome's dominance here and the fact that they've gone rogue, essentially. See, you can say, well, we have all these other choices. If you don't like what Chrome is doing, then you can just switch to Brave browser or Opera or Vivaldi. But aside from Safari and Firefox, most of the alternatives that you have heard of are basically just Chrome. They're Chrome with a superficial coat of paint. Heck, even Microsoft Edge is Google Chrome, but with Bing search ads to monetize your browsing habits. And look, the general availability of this spyware hit last week, but I've waited to make this video. I've been doing research and trying to make sure that I get things right here. And truthfully, it's not completely bad news. There are certain upsides to the way this has been implemented. For example, it used to be that all of this auctioning for ad space was done against cloud-based dossiers that basically required Google to build profiles on every user that was living on their server and to track you across the web and across devices. According to the documentation here, though, with these APIs, most of this data seems to stay on your device. at least when it comes to Google's ad platform anyway. There's no telling what third parties are going to do in order to vacuum up as much information on you as possible. It's not like the demand for ever more detailed interest-based advertising is going to go away. How will this technology evolve? What other types of information is the Privacy Sandbox going to collect here? The fact is, surveillance tech is unethical on its face. It doesn't matter why this data is being compiled, it's wrong. It doesn't matter that this is for advertising right now. This kind of technology, this kind of surveillance makes everyone less safe. It could accidentally rat out political dissidents living under a fascist regime. It could expose those who have researched prohibited medical care to criminal liability. It could expose protesters to violence and crackdowns. What have you? There's so many reasons that this is wrong. Everyone is entitled to privacy. These technologies fundamentally compromise that right for everyone. Privacy is a human right that's worthy of proactive defense at a legislative level, and the burden shouldn't fall on the individual to comprehend every risk, understand all the trade-offs, and implement their own proactive measures in order to maintain that right. Because at that point, it's no longer a right. They're privileges for those who can be bothered to understand and defend themselves. Like I said, it doesn't matter why they're collecting this data. It's a liability that undermines the human rights to privacy, and this tech needs to be destroyed. Unfortunately, it looks more like Microsoft is going to be leaving this on-device surveillance intact in Edge. And with the two biggest browsers by market share supporting this spyware sandbox, it's only a matter of time before websites that can't detect the spyware in Firefox and Safari decide to cut you off. Because beyond the human rights issue, Google has put the web in jeopardy here. By forging their own path and implementing their own proprietary by any other name technology, the web's days are numbered here. There will come a day when sites like YouTube will tell Firefox users that their browser isn't supported because it doesn't include anti-user features. That day, Firefox, Apple, and their users will have to make a choice. For Firefox and Apple, it's a Faustian bargain. They need to choose between including the malvertising APIs or fade into complete irrelevancy. And for users, they have to decide to either submit to Chrome's malvertising regime and continue to use services that they've come to depend on, or find alternatives that may end up being unsatisfactory. On that day, the web will be truly dead. But there are things that can be done about this. If you're in the United States, you can contact your representatives. State legislators and federal legislators are able to make laws that can affect change here. There's also antitrust proceedings that can break up Google and prevent their monopolistic control from ruining the web. You can also educate yourself on what you can do to defend against this kind of attack on personal liberty. I'll have some resources linked below. But I think that's going to do it for now. I would love to hear your take on this. What do you think about Google's Privacy Sandbox? Leave me a comment and let me know. I want to thank my patrons for their continued support. It's because of them that I've been able to keep the lights on here and continue making videos just like this. If you believe in the work that I'm doing and you want to help support this show, make sure you use the links below to pledge your monthly support. But with that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.